Sure. So I'm the founder of the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice, a nonprofit organization that frees wrongfully convicted people and pursues policy changes aimed at preventing that from happening. We've been able to free 11 wrongfully convicted people. We helped pass 3 laws aimed at preventing wrongful conviction. I'm I'm an advisory board member of the national coalition group called It Could Happen to You, which the foundation's part of, and we helped pass an additional 5 laws. The foundation has 10 active cases. I'm co-counsel on some of those cases, so I guess I've kind of given myself away. I am an attorney as well, and I'm active doing policy work in New York, Pennsylvania, and California. I have a master's degree. My master's thesis is on wrongful conviction clauses and reform, and I got into doing this advocacy work because, unfortunately, I was wrongfully convicted myself. I was arrested at 16 for a murder and rape, which I did not commit. I turned 17 by the time the trial rolled around, which I lost. So I was wrongfully convicted of a murder and rape, despite the DNA test that didn't match me, with the conviction being caused by coerced false confession, prosecutorial misconduct, fraud by the medical examiner, terrible public defender. I did lose 7 appeals. I got turned down for parole. Ultimately, I was exonerated through further DNA testing, which not only excluded me, but also identified the actual perpetrator, whose DNA was in the database, because left free while I was doing time for his crime. He killed his second victim 3.5 years later after killing the victim on my case. So my charges were dismissed on actual innocence grounds, and hence this mission in life of freeing people in the same position I was, while preventing what happened to me from others, hence the policy work while fighting for broader justice reform.
That's a lot to take in.
It is, but I think it sets the tone and orients everybody for everything that you will ask me and that we will discuss from this point forward.
You're absolutely correct. But like I said, I like the left field question. So first off, yes, and foremost, you said you were convicted at the age of 16. To be honest, what emotions were you going through at that moment?
Well, I was arrested at 16. I turned 17 at the time of the trial, so where I was convicted. So do you want me to answer as to what was my emotions when I was arrested, or what were my emotions when I was convicted? Which
convicted.
Convicted. Yeah, I was in a state of disbelief. Because to my way of thinking, at least up to that point in time, I thought only guilty people were found guilty. The first 3 charges that were read off, I was found not guilty of, and then I heard guilty, and then guilty, and then guilty. And I thought, well, wait a minute, did I hear that right? Did I just miss the word not? So I was kind of like I distrusted my hearing. I was kind of in a state of disbelief. I was stunned, and I did not expect that to happen. And I frankly didn't know what was going to happen next to me as a result of being found guilty.
Going to jail for the first time, what was your first your mindset going to jail, the whole jail experience itself? How did you view yourself personally as someone being part of a conviction, in your mindset, being in jail, being incarcerated?
It was frightening. I knew that there was a vigilante mentality towards people who've been convicted of sex offenses. I knew that when I was taken into custody after I was found guilty, because I had been in jail prior to that when I first got arrested on the case and I got bailed out. So I did know that. So I was frightened to go back there. And, I didn't like being in an environment where the correction officers were in charge, and a lot of them were verbally abusive. And it's really a place where there is no accountability, because the people that supposedly are in charge, the sergeants, lieutenants, captains, they were correction officers themselves, and they're really buddy with everybody. So you're really beyond the scope of any type of accountability or oversight. And even they didn't like people who are convicted of sex offenses. So it was really frightening as thinking about that.
Being in that position, again, I personally have not been to jail, but you see these movies, you see TV shows about people going to jail, going with crew, forming a club and everything like that. Was there ever an escape for you, as an escape go, reading books, going to a library? I honestly, I don't know what facilities they had at that time of the correction facility that you're at, But was there anything like that to keep you off your mind of not being incarcerated?
Yeah. So firstly, I spent 13 and a half of the 16 years I served in Elmira Correctional Facility. So that was broken up because I was transferred. Like I initially went to Elmira from 1991 to 94. Excuse me, to 95. Then I went to Eastern Correctional Facility, and then I got sent back to Elmira for 10 months. I got transferred to Shawanga Correctional Facility for a year and a half, and then I got transferred back to Elmira for a decade. And then, and then, and by the way, I didn't know I was going to stay there for a decade. They did just transferred me back. They didn't tell me how long they were intending to keep me there. And then I got transferred to Sing Sing. I spent the last 28 days, but there were things to take my mind off of it. But it was that I chose to use the things that way. It wasn't that the prison was offering it or some person working there suggested that. I decided that I would take advantage of the programs that they had, and I would take. They like to give you like an assignment in the morning and the afternoon. They say, look, these are the different programs that we have. Which one are you interested in? So I decided that I would orient what I took to have some kind of potential benefit to me, to learn something that could benefit me when I would return back to society. So I didn't take a janitor job, for example. I didn't see any point in working in the prison laundry, just doing laundry, or jobs like that, or being a clerk for the guards and just typing silly things up. I mean, I did things more like getting GED, and I learned how to type, and I took general business, which pertains to usage of the computer in the workforce, and computer repair, and painter's helper, and plumbing certificates. And I went to college and got an associate's degree and completed a year towards the bachelor's before funding was cut. I took a course on how adults learn for the purpose of then working as a teacher's aide, where I worked for a year and a half helping other prisoners work towards GED and get adult basic education. But that class was really valuable, and I apply that to myself now because I know how adults learn. So I utilize those techniques for me, and we'll get into my formal education later. Certainly what I learned there on typing, and more in the information age, everything is computer. And if you know the keyboard, you can access information even faster rather than having to look down at the keyboard. But I also did things like I went to the law library to study the law so I could proactively try to defend myself, overturn the conviction. And I read articles about people who were exonerated. And from 1998 to 2006, I started reading nonfiction books. Prior to that, I really was just reading fiction books outside of information on the law. But one day, one of the clerks came to me and said, look, it's not my business, excuse me if I'm overstepping, but, you come regularly and, you take these fiction books out, and I get it. It's something to do. It takes your mind out of here, but can't you accomplish that same purpose if you read nonfiction books? You can do that and learn something. And so I listened to that advice, and hence reading 3 or 4 nonfiction books a week from 1998 to 2006. So I did that, and then developed little routines. So like I loved when it was football season. Like on Sundays, I would watch the 1 o'clock. I would overdose on football. I'd watch the 1 o'clock game, the 4 o'clock game, the Sunday night football. Then it was Monday night football. So I would watch that, and I have these little routines so I could get out of the prison a little bit. When I would play sports like basketball, ping pong, chess, I engaged in elaborate delusion, and I used to pretend like I was a professional player, and so were other people playing. But it was not really like kids fooling around on the playground. I mean, I needed to get out of the prison for a couple of hours. I listened to sports talk radio, but it wasn't simply listening to sports talk radio. This was like a lifeline to the outside. A voice was being transmitted in from the free world, and so that took on kind of a meaning in a desperate situation like that.
To be honest with you, the way that you talk about it, it seems like you took a situation that was really bad or really dark,
Yes.
an area in which people look at prison and jail and incarceration, and you turned it into inspiration. And
Right.
it's just your story, or just part of your story that you're mentioning to me. It really just seems like how you chose to live and spend your time in jail was to benefit yourself, to be more educational. It seems like you
Yes.
just sent us to school.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, you're right. It's true. It's
Yeah.
true. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there was a proverb. There was a proverb amongst the prisoners, that that the prison can be a poor man's university.
Yeah.
And so I
exactly.
heard of that, and I applied that as literally as I could. Like you said, I kind of turned everything into a school. I mean, I learned how to play chess, and I accumulated like a modest chess library, and just started playing. Even that was like really an example of learning, because what I kind of have a philosophy that about playing chess in life. In order to win a game of chess, you have to see the board just a move or half a move further than your opponent. So that means you got to think about, well, if I take this move, what's the reaction? What's the continuation? How does this come out? Is this favorable to me? Is this not? And so I liked doing that in the moves that I made while I was in prison, and even now. So I feel like chess is about a lot more than just a game. Plus, it's good to just think ahead in general, to be in that mind frame. And I still play, and I feel tranquil when I do that.
I love chess. One growing up, I was part of the chess club during the elementary school. In my local city, they have chess downtown. So during the summer, I'll walk down, and they have a couple desks, a couple chairs, benches that have chess. What's it called? The board built in.
Yes.
So I'll go there, I'll watch people play, and I'll just join in, and I'll play the chess game. I bought overall, I think I have probably 14 chess sets in my whole entire life, from the very smallest one to the really big ones. I love the game of chess.
One more thing on chess, though, that I did in prison. One more thing on chess. So I've never actually shared this with anybody, but I will now, since we're doing a non-traditional interview where all types of questions will come, as you put it, from left field. And I like that because it's interactive. It's not the same old. Last thing was, I actually played some chess by correspondence. So I played. So I applied to UFC, and got a little mini ranking, and I played by correspondence. Just you send your moves back and forth in the mail, and that also helped me to keep my keep my mind active.
That is awesome. I gotta try. I honestly have never tried that before. That's something I gotta put now on my bucket list to do.
Yeah. I love. Speaking of that, no, I'm saying that because one of the ways that I celebrate life and I celebrate my freedom, I've been home for 14 years now, is I like to experience the world, and the way that I see myself doing that is doing new things. So that means I like to have new experiences. I like to do new activities. I like to try new food. I like to go new places and travel. And I even have interest, like you said, in doing things that I have no interest doing. I've never golfed. Okay, it looks like an incredibly boring sport. I don't think it could be less interactive, you versus your opponent, if they wanted to be. But there is no defense, right? There is no playing defense in golf, as an example. Yet, using that as an example, one day I want to try it. I do want to check that box. I do, and if I'm in a restaurant someplace and the more unusual the item is on the menu, the more likely I am to order it. And when I'm shopping, if I happen to see something like today, for example, or earlier, when I was shopping and I walked down the aisle where it had some salad dressing, and they had some, blueberry, it was blueberry vinaigrette. And I've never tried that before, so I bought it just to try it out as an example of that.
I love that. I'm similar. It's funny that you mentioned that. I'm the same way, because for the longest time, every time I've seen calamari on the restaurant, like on the menu, I'm just like, I have no clue what it is. I refuse to eat it. So it wasn't until about 2 years ago where friends were like, oh, try this. It's calamari. I'm just like, it looks like crap. And I thought it was at first when I looked at it, because it's breaded. I thought it was onion rings. So I ate it. I'm like, oh, this is pretty good. And then it's like, oh, we should have some calamari next time. I'm like, okay. So I go down the menu and I realize what's actually a calamari is. I'm like, yeah, that's gross, but it tastes so good.
Right. Yeah, that's wonderful. Right, I got you. Yeah, great example.
Going back to, again, the prison, because again, you chose a dark place, and I'm in quotation, I'm going to say a dark place, because I've heard other stories where people go there and they become reformed. But are all prisons, well, seeing that you've bounced around on multiple correction or facilities,
Yeah.
are all of them, do they offer those incentives, as in a library, courses, GEDs to be done? Or
Yes.
or do they encourage it, or is it something where it's up to the people that are incarcerated to actually make that choice?
So that really doesn't lend itself to a bouquet answer. So I'll put some color to it and answer it that way.
That works.
So cool. So in general, all the prisons have like GED and vocational trades, with the caveat that there are some prisons that are just, that the whole population is just designed to be solitary confinement. So the prisons like that have no programs. The only program that is there is prisoners that are not in solitary, but they're working in a job that pertains to running the prison. So
Gotcha.
janitor, cooking food, laundry, maybe building repair, that's it. But so outside of those facilities, all the prisons have vocational trades. Now, that having been said, some have more than others, and some have certain programs that other prisons don't. In New York State, at least, you have to go to school towards the GED, but that's only until your reading and writing is 8th grade level, as established by a standardized test. And once that happens, if you want to make a foolish decision and decide to sign out of school to not do it anymore, you can. But that's yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
And by the
That
way,
makes
in some say, I have met former prisoners that were in Pennsylvania, which is a state where I was not incarcerated at, and some of them have informed me that the way that the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections works is that if you're so anyone's sentenced to life, and that doesn't mean like natural life necessarily, like 10 to 15 to life, 20 to life, 25, anything considered to be like, the programs are very limited. They'll only allow a small percentage of lifers in a vocational trade, and the rest of the people will be people that have less of a sentence, on the theory that, well, you're doing a life sentence, so what does it matter? You're not going to get back out to do it anyway. It's just kind of like a waste of time and resources. But I really don't like that approach, because I think that, prisons really should be about rehabilitation, and learning a trade as part of that, and, doing your time, even if you just do it as a prison management thing, that's a benefit in and of itself. I mean, it gives the prisoners something positive to do. It makes the prisoners a little bit more manageable. So now it's a safer environment for the civilians and security staff that work there. So I'm very pro, vocational trade and education for prisoners. And one reform that really needs to be done nationally, again, looking at my story and my experience, that a lot of the vocational trades that I completed, the curriculum was obsolete. So as example, I completed the plumbing program. I accumulated 6 certificates in plumbing, but the problem is that nearly all the training was in iron pipe.
Oh.
And now it's PVC pipe and copper. So upon my release, if I decided that I wanted that career, I would start at virtually the same place that I would if I hadn't gone through the vocational trade in prison. So I think that the curriculum should be up to date, and there should be some independent testing and assessment that goes on periodically to make sure that the civilians that are working as instructors are actually teaching. So I found that there were some instructors that took it serious, and that they really were there to try to make a difference and teach, and they loved their craft and couldn't wait to pass it on. But yet there were others who really were just there for a paycheck. They just basically hung out in their office, and you would have to bother them in order for them to teach you something.
And that probably led to you probably getting in trouble if you have to bug them after.
If you go too far, sure. And then similarly, their college education, college was unfortunately taken out of prison in 1995. The rhetoric was, well, why should a prisoner get a free college education? My son and daughter can't get a free education. I can't get one. I can't afford to send them to school. So that was really a false rhetoric. So what I mean by that is, first of all, the financial aid forms, and I know because I filled them out. I went to school on grants while incarcerated. The financial aid forms are the same for incarcerated people, students, as well as non-incarcerated students. So nobody who would be ineligible to go to college on a grant while free would suddenly become eligible simply because they were incarcerated. It still had to do with your parents' income. And then on top of that, it was like nationally, maybe 1.5% of the total number of students going to school on a grant were incarcerated. So it's not like that for every person going to college, there was another person on the outside who was denied a seat because the funding was taken. And if you think about it, beyond that, who do you think has a better chance of making a successful reintegration back into society, into a law-abiding life? Somebody that has had their horizons broadened through college education that is simultaneously equipped for gainful employment, or somebody that's coming back out with that's not equipped for gainful employment, that technology has passed them by, and now they also have a record, which is all those things are going to make it even more difficult to obtain gainful employment. And who would you rather have living next to you? Some years ago, it was estimated in New York that it was more than $70,000 a year to incarcerate a prisoner. So I'd rather have somebody, as a taxpayer, I would rather have somebody paying into the tax base because they're free and they're employed gainfully than they're being incarcerated because they can't get a job, so they commit another offense. All the costs associated with the court system, and then they're a drain on the tax base, so we pay to incarcerate them rather than them paying in. So you can look at it from multiple perspectives and still come out to the same conclusion.
I was actually going to ask that question is, how would you feel being in that situation, being incarcerated? Like, I would love for the prisons to help reform prisoners. I would love for them to show that, hey, I could go there and get an education if I want to get an education. But again, you beg that question. It's debatable, is that it's the taxpayers that are paying for that. And it's those taxpayers that are, in quotation, suffering because, let's say, the person that got sent there might have killed their son or their daughter, and they're paying for that person's education in that sense. So I understand on both sides of the field where it's unfair, but at the same time, you can't. Me personally, I wish that and as you asked me that question, who'd I rather have living beside me? My ultimate answer to that, whoever has more purpose, as in who's more driven to be more successful in life. That's, to be honest, that's exactly that's exactly how I'd answer that question, because you could be living and you can have everything in this world, but if you're not driven to be better, but then someone that came from prison after 20, 15 years or whatever, they're driven to make something of themselves. They could be the worst person going into prison, but could be the best person on that neighborhood. Because
and
they
to build off,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
Because for example, they could do all that. They could come out and guess what? They could, like you mentioned, they could have their plumber's license and they could go around fixing people's water. They could be cutting grass. They could be just simply making themselves for them, but turn a bad situation into a good situation. So to me, it depends on their purpose.
Right, and I also want to build off your point, which is that I do know people that are released on parole. They were guilty. They did a crime. That's why they did time. But they did rehabilitate themselves. They did improve themselves. They are committed to living crime-free lives, and many of them are adding to society. Like some are working as teachers, some are diverting at-risk youth from a life of crime, ultimately ending up in prison. Some are working with homeless populations. Some are working on prisoner reentry and justice reform. So that was only possible because they got tools while they were incarcerated and continued to have opportunity on the outside. I personally saw the impact of college education on prisoners. I knew some of the prisoners entered college that I knew before they went to the program, and their conversations, which, as someone speaks is kind of like a clue as to what's going on up here in their head. And people went from talking about war stories of various illegal activities they did, some of which they got away with, some of which they got caught, and talking about, chasing money and, and women and, street life. Conversations went from that to daydreaming out loud about becoming a drug counselor or one of these other professions that I'm talking about, that I've mentioned already. So I saw the impact on it. And in terms of myself personally, when I was released, I had obtained GED, I had gotten associates, I had gotten a year or two as a bachelor's before the funding was cut. So that meant that I had that much less ground to cover once I was released. So I didn't have to start from scratch. I was able to just get the bachelor's through 10 classes more, get the bachelor's degree, and then I springboard from that. I got the master's degree from John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and I did ultimately become a lawyer. So getting a law degree, getting a license. So it would have been much harder to do all of that had I not been able to receive any college education for prisoners. And that kind of intersects into another point related to this. One of the non-innocence criminal justice reform issues that I feel passionate about is the whole ban the box issue, which means, should you have to check a box on a job application as to whether you have ever been convicted of a crime.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of job discrimination that goes on that way, and I really think that employers should not be able to ask that until after they decided to extend a job offer or not to someone with the record, and then once they then disclose that, and if they decide to rescind the offer, there has to be some legit reason. Now, no one is saying that you should be allowed to work in a profession if the crime was related to that. So I would never advocate a bank robber suddenly is going to work as a teller. Okay. but outside of some extreme example like that, if the offense that someone did time for has nothing to do with the job in question now, I don't think they should be discriminated against. And related to that, as part of that whole ban the box, there is a disturbing trend in some universities that when students apply to as students, they have to disclose whether they have a criminal record or not, and have that as a factor to be considered. And that's really disturbing to me because it's just unseemly on the surface of it to deny education based on somebody's record. And then, quite obvious to me, they must be planning for a crime-free life. Otherwise, why do they want to go to school and study and better themselves?
Exactly. Which I fully agree with you. And that's why I mentioned it depends on the purpose of that person. If that person is driven, has that purpose to contribute to a society, they should not be denied it. So I'm glad we're on the same page with that.
Absolutely.
16 years from I'm not sure what from
age 17 from age 17 to 32. Yes.
So you missed a lot, I would say.
I would as well. We're still in agreement, my friend. Continue on.
Saying that, coming out and knowing what you know now, the things you've missed in the 16 years, what is one of those things that or a few things that you know that you missed out on, whether it's special events or things to see? Because like you mentioned earlier, like the age of technology, like when you went in, it was probably cassette players. When you came out, it went to like DVDs or HD disc. So, and then you mentioned also that the technology is not up to standards in prison as well. So what are those things that you missed out on that you wish you had a chance to, I guess, to enjoy when it happened?
Without a doubt, go to the high school prom. But, and I didn't graduate high school on time, and I missed births, deaths, weddings. So many rites of passages happen between the age of 17 and 32. So, for example, when I was released, I had to do many of those things at a much later age. So I had not gotten a license. I had never lived on my own. I never had to write a check. I never had to go shopping. I never had to balance a budget. Technology was different. It felt like I was in a parallel world, an alternative universe, one that I didn't belong in. It's because for a number of reasons, for example, technology. So GPS, cell phones, internet hadn't been created. Culture was different. Cities and towns looked different. There were different people that were inhabitants there. So collectively, it did feel like I was, a fish out of water. So that was a big transition. And then the overwhelming majority of my extended family never came to see me while I was incarcerated, and the few that did, it was extremely sporadic. There was often many years in between visits, so it was awkward when I would meet up with my extended family, and I knew who they were from memories from when I was younger, but I was a different person, and so were they. So, that was awkward. That was another thing to try to overcome. There's, psychological after effects that I had to deal with as well. Part of being wrongfully in prison, certainly stigma. I was in prison for 16 years wrongfully, but I was still there for 16 years. So how much of that rubbed off on me? Is it safe to be alone someplace with me? So when it comes to personal relationships, yes, that has been a significant obstacle. And, speaking of that, too, I mean, the years I was really supposed to be learning approach dynamics and read body language, and I really didn't. So that made things really difficult. And then I always had in the back of my mind, I don't want somebody to say that I made them feel uncomfortable. So I mean, all those were things that have been obstacles that I've had to deal with.
Wow, that's a lot, to tell you the truth. I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, just coming out of you, like you said, it's that different dimension. It's like you're going from the future to the past, or sorry, it's like looking to the future. You step out and that, let's say, for example, a favorite restaurant is down the street, and you go there and all you see, it's a mall. And the cars,
right.
And then you see cars that you're like, especially 16 years of technology under the car manufacturing. You see cars that are, for example, like station wagons and big boats. When you were going in and you come out, you're like, wait a second.
Right.
I mean, it's very different. It's very, very different. So it must have been a shock coming out.
It really was. And I'll share with you that the more I found, looking back in hindsight, that the more I learned technology, the more tied into the world I felt, the less strange it felt being on the outside. Mm-hmm. And tied into that theme, especially early on, it felt weird or strange or not natural. I mean, maybe all of the above. Just having keys. I have keys, and I'm allowed to drive. And if I decide to go someplace, nobody has to know where I'm going. What time am I coming back? So all those things felt kind of unusual for me as well.
Yeah, especially I don't know if you have a house now or apartment.
No, I do. No, I have a house now. Mm-hmm.
So, and I say that because prison, you're going in I'm not sure if it's an 8x8 or 6x6 or whatever.
Yeah, right. Yeah, very small.
Yeah, going from there, now you're like, hey, I have a house. Do you find, again, this might be an earlier, when you came out and when you had the house the first time, you're just like, wait, I have so much space.
Yeah, no, that was a thing. Yeah, even when I was living in an apartment prior to that, that definitely was a thing for sure. I mean, it felt unusual to have that. Yes, absolutely. And it took a while for me even to get up to speed. Like the idea that I had to go and get my own mail every day became something to do rather than it being sent to me, and getting there's what we call recurring monthly expenses or cost of living expenses, so recurring bills that happen, your fixed costs. Mm-hmm. And I remember I would get like a cell phone bill, like, well, what do these people want? I just paid them last month. What are you here again for? Why are you, and the junk mail? Well, why are you people bothering me? Don't you know you're making me open this envelope and be worried about what's in it and what's going on, and I have to read through it and you go through a process just to determine it's a bunch of junk just for me to crinkle it up. Why are you bothering? Why are you harassing me in this way? Don't you got something better to do?
Those are the people. Those are the people that should be in jail, to be honest.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so yeah, but I also found myself as well that in order to try to better assimilate back into society, so I did things to try to break out of prison habits. So like I stopped using prison slang, for example. And one of the habits, I stopped doing prison habits. So, for example, in prison, you would always try to have your back against the wall. And so initially, when I was released, if I would eat in a restaurant, I would pick the seat that had its back to the wall. But I forced myself to start to sit in the seat where everything's just going on behind me, just to try to break out of that way of thinking. But it took a long time to do that. I mean, initially, whenever another male would come within my circumference, the adrenaline would roll, and I would find myself just looking at their hands. What are they doing with their hands? They have like a weapon. They're reaching for something, and I'm just like, and I'm sizing people up, and I'm just, all right, as soon as he takes a swing, I'm going to do this, this, and this. Try to do but all this is going on in my mind, and the other person has no idea that all this is taking place. So it took a while, even just to like break out of that mode, because there's so much violence in prison, and you have to defend yourself, and you have to be ready to go at the drop of a dime over nothing, at over nothing, So just to break myself out of that, took a while to do that. And maybe on a lighter note, one last thing, and let you get in on say too much at once. You hold it on your head to reply. But even now though, and I've been home for 14 years, so even now, every now and then, sitting on a couch feels too comfortable, and so I get off the couch and I just sit down on the hard floor. Because remember, the main piece of furniture in the cell is the bed, and the mattresses were this thick. And if you're not watching this, I've got like 2 inches, between my thumb and the other finger, and it's like a hard metal frame, that has no give in it. And so I've slept on that for 16 years. So I'm not used to a couch. After a while, the comfortability of a couch is too much. I got to get off the damn couch and sit down on the floor for a little while. One time somebody came in the house, they made a joke of it. I was sitting down on the floor, and I have a cat, and the cat was up on the couch laying down, and the guy said, "Hey, wait a minute, you and the cat, you got your roles backwards. Hold on, you're supposed to be on the couch, and the cat's supposed to be on the floor."
That is awesome. I love this conversation. This is awesome. One thing I got to ask about, you mentioned family members, and that, to be honest with you, being at such a young age going into prison, and also being there for so long, how were they, in a sense? Because you mentioned in the beginning that this is just by assumption now, visitations, was it a daily visitations in the beginning, and then it panned off as in once in a blue moon? Because that takes a psychological effect as well, because you're always anticipating and you're hoping that someone comes and visits you, because that gives you a little bit hope that, hey, someone does remember me. And because, again, going in as being innocent, knowing that you're innocent, that person will listen to you and try their best. You're hoping they'll try their best on the outside to get you released sooner than possible. So
yeah, you hit upon a few things right there, very, very perceptive. So firstly, initially my mother used to come like twice a month. The prison setup, you could, in a maximum security prison, you could get a visit every day, theoretically, as far as the prison schedule, which is kind of crazy, because in the max you can get the visit every day, but when you in the medium security facility, they only have visits on weekends. And for the life of me, I don't understand that. Okay, just like tied into that, the prisoners, the Department of Corrections in New York, at least, the prisoners that were from the city would be housed in the facilities that were in the country, and prisoners that were from the country would be put in the prisons near the city. And so that was kind of backwards, because don't you want to facilitate visitation? There's a strong correlation, visitation, community support, family support, and rehabilitation and successful transition of crime-free life. So that was kind of backwards, and they had the system, well, towards the downside of your sentence, you can, they send you more to the prisons closer to the city, but by then it's too late. I've lost touch with everybody already. They're not thinking about me no more. It's too late. So with that background, in my specific situation, so my mother was the only consistent visitor. She didn't come every day. I was sent to the country. I was from the suburbs, so 4.5 hours each way. So my mother would come and see me twice a month. My grandmother would accompany her. But my grandmother passed away after being in prison wrongfully for 6 years. And in the last 5, 6 years, that tapering off that you were talking about, in the long trip just grating on her, and things tightening up a little bit financially, and, issues with her back and her feet. So all the sum total of all those factors culminated into in the last 5, 6 years, I was lucky if I would get a visit from her once every 6 months.
Mhm.
So as far as my extended family, curious dynamic that happened, which was that they all, with the exception of my uncle, who was in law enforcement, and his daughter, everybody believed in my innocence, but their belief in my innocence did not translate into them assisting me on the morale level, keeping in regular touch with me, letter, phone call, you can call and come visit. It didn't translate to that. And similarly, several times, 2 or 3 different times, when my mother made rounds amongst the family, and the idea was, she was pushing the idea, why don't everybody just contribute something that's manageable financially, and this way I could hire a lawyer to try to be exonerated. And everybody, declined to participate in that. So several sets of aunts and uncles that would visit, disappear for 3 years, visit, disappear for 3 years. So that happened. I had 2 friends that came to see me. One friend came once in the first year. That was enough for him. And another friend stayed in touch with me for 5 years, eventually went into the military, and then we just lost touch, and that was the end of that. So in a lot of ways, though not literally, for most intents and purposes, I did the time by myself, and so it was very lonely there. Another aspect of your question pertaining to needing someone on the outside, really, to be my eyes and ears and hands and feet, as far as doing steps connected to try to help me regain my freedom. Really, my mother was that, but she was really filled that role in the sense that I wanted her to, and so I would ask her to look things up. I would ask her to do various tasks, but there would really be like a lack of urgency on her end, or I might spend a lot of time explaining something to her, and she still doesn't quite get it right. One time I asked her, well, did you call so-and-so person? Yeah. Okay, great. You did. Okay. What happened? What'd they say? They didn't pick up the phone. Okay. Did you call back? No. Well, it's been 2 months. What happened? So really that became a source of frustration. That became a source of tension, both while I was inside and even afterwards. And I do feel like the preoccupation, this is common in people who are wrongfully in prison, that conversations, rather than really being authentic interpersonal communication, really turned into sessions that were really preoccupied with trying to get out of prison, instead of that just being like simply just one aspect, an important aspect that has to be dealt with urgently with due diligence, but yet separate from, I want to know about you. How are you actually doing today, David?
Yeah.
What's been going on here? This is the latest and greatest with me personally. Here's what's going on. People you and I both know, and having that authentic exchange and feeding the soul. And there was an absence of that as well.
And I think, honestly, that's most important than anything, is
Right.
to keep them, it's to know that, hey, a simple question is just, hey, how are you doing? Because that
Right.
shows that you care. And then going, hey, just to keep you up, hey, this person got married and this person has a kid. It's that keeping in that connection, and you're building that bridge with that person on the outside world. So you're absolutely right on that one. It's that, I think, is the most key function in communication than anything. I'd like to move away from prison,
Sure.
but again, talk about it. It's going to be touch
Yeah.
base on anything. I see on your background, you create a foundation for justice, as well as fighting for wrongfully conviction. It looks like you're just really given, and I'm sorry for the use of words, but this is real talk and this is my show. I can say whatever I want. You're giving the finger back to justice, saying, screw you, you guys screwed me. I'm going to show you what I can do. You guys put me through school, not really put you through school, but you kind of use jail, saying, hey, guess what? I'm going to be better than when I came in. And doing so, I'm going to get even better because I guess what? I'm going to come for everyone that was wrongfully convicted and then get them out, which is now saying the law, there are certain pieces of the law that's broken. And you took your time, 16 years, looked through it, studied it, came out of prison, studied it some more, and now you're fighting. And that is a great sense, I'm pretty sure you're feeling. Once, I guess, when everything established, you're like, wow, I've actually created a force to be reckoned with against those that are wrongfully, for those people that are wrongfully accused and against the justice system. So let me know about, talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So when I was released, I was an individual advocate for 5 years. So I started speaking. I was a columnist for a weekly newspaper. I was doing media interviews, basically trading privacy for awareness. So all those things, speaking, writing, interviews, meeting with elected officials. And then when I finally was compensated, I wanted to go to the next level of helping to free people wrongfully in prison, hence using some of the money from the compensation to start the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice. And we have been able to get 11 people home. We have been able to pass laws, aimed at preventing wrongful conviction. And I look at, I make sense of what happened to me in this kaleidoscopic way. Like the reason that happened to me is for me to do this work, and it's my purpose in the world. And so with that, I make my suffering count for something. It makes a difference. It's healing. It's cathartic, and I have some inner peace in doing that. And really, doing this advocacy work is the vehicle by which I prevent myself really from being angry. So the first week I was home, I was angry, and I felt like it really was destroying me. And I just gave to the realization, look, I want to enjoy my life as much as I can. I can't do that if I'm angry or bitter. I've lost so much already. Why would I want to, in effect, lose the rest of my life? And if I was angry or bitter, it's not like I'm impacting any of the people responsible for what happened. I'm really the only loser in that scenario. And so I take that energy and I channel it into the advocacy work that I do. So it does provide, doing this work does give me that outlet. And you're right. I am thinking I'm coming back for everybody who's wrongfully in prison. Every last unjust policy, I'm going to do everything I can to try to change all of these things. This is not going to continue to just be out of control like this. We're going to try to improve this to, for other people. So, I like using the position I have as somebody, who's exonerated. I can have a little bit more of a platform than maybe somebody else who has not been, who's saying things just as valid as me. So rather than live in an idealistic world and pretend that doesn't exist, I'd rather just embrace it and use it as a tool in the struggle.
That is awesome. That is awesome. That is just awesome. I love it because I honestly, I have that same mindset. It's more of a, okay, you guys are I remember talking to one guest and she said, because she's a woman, and the position that she tried to go into, they said, no, you can't, no, you can't, no, you can't. She's like, you know what? You'll see. And I will do it. And she just went on top, overcame all obstacles, and just outshined everybody. And you did the same thing. You're like, you know what? You took 16 years of my life because of wrongfully convicted. That's fine. I will study my ass off. I will make sure that when I'm come out of here, I'm going to become better than what I was. And even, I'm pretty sure, and no offense to your potential, but I'm pretty sure that if you weren't convicted, your life wouldn't be on this plateau. Right. And
I agree 100%. No, none taken. You're completely correct. I agree with you 1,000%. Absolutely. Yes, that's true.
Yeah. So and like you said, this could be your calling. It's a fact that a lot of people, I believe, go to prison. And they do go to prison, whether wrongfully convicted or not. Everyone has a purpose in life. And you have to kind of use your environment to make yourself better. And I think some people are sent to prison just not because they did something wrong, but because they're saying, and as you mentioned, if they do have an education program, they should look into that, because guess what? They could be the next Jeff.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
And
exactly.
I think a lot of people,
100%.
And I think
it's true.
Yeah. I think some people don't choose that path. And then when they come out, they hate. And like you said, you're full of anger. I think a lot of people came out of prison angry and they're like, you know what? I'm going to get revenge on the world instead of saying, hey, let me change that revenge to something positive.
Right.
And because of that, I think that's why some of them go back to prison.
Right.
And at the same time, as you mentioned, it's that, okay, that psychological aspect of it is that so much things have changed. I just felt more comfortable in prison. I remember the movie, The Shawshank Redemption, the guy
Right.
mentioned that aspect as well. And yeah, a lot has changed when you're there for such a long time as well. Anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, that there is like you do find like a niche in prison, and the world is much different, but you're better off to struggle and feel lonely on the outside. I think the worst day in society free is better than the best day in prison. And so I would encourage people in that situation just to hang in there and, don't do anything, just to go back to prison, just go back into, a familiar environment. You can weather the storm, and there's so many things you can do to better the world and better yourself, just by being free rather than, being in prison.
I love that. I'm pretty much done, so I'm good, to be honest with you.
All right. Well,
I
want to share one more thing.
That's
Actually,
exactly what I was
two
gonna say.
more things that I think
Yeah.
about that. All right. So, if I was to leave like a tool for people listening, I would say set a goal. This could be overcoming one type of adversity or another. Set a goal and have a realistic plan. You should be able to look at the plan 3 or 4 different ways and say to yourself, yeah, I see how this could work out. Be flexible. Remember that the goal is the goal. The plan's not the goal. So if an unexpected door opens up that brings you closer to the door, you got to walk. If an unexpected door opens up that brings you closer to the goal, you have to walk through it. No excuses. There might be reasons why something is harder, why there's challenges, but no reasons why you can't actually do it. Work really, really hard. How bad do you want something? A sports analogy, leave it all out on the field and never give up. And when you can't go on anymore, then remember that you might have been on the verge of a breakthrough, but because you quit, that's why it's not going to happen. So keep going anyway, even though you can't, and just to see what happens on the other side. And when you do break through, you have to reach back for people similarly situated. You have to do some more kind of preventative side. And I know that extends far beyond wrongful imprisonment, that, that could apply to somebody who's faced racism or discrimination or sexism, or someone that's been homeless, or another person that is experiencing debilitating illness, or someone that's been a domestic abuse survivor, or somebody that's been sex trafficked, or, a victim of sexual violence. So I know I've seen from either I know personally or I've seen from 1,000 feet away, just on social media, people in those walks of life that are now doing meaningful work, helping populations that they once were part of themselves. So I know that can apply for everyone. And if you've liked what you've heard here today with David and I and this podcast, there is the documentary short on Amazon Prime called Conviction, which is about my life post-exoneration and the advocacy work that I do. I do have the dream of expanding my organization, Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice, to each state and really to each country, because I really see wrongful conviction as a worldwide problem. And we'll do that as we're able to get public support for that. We do have a crowdfunding page, which is on the writing in the background, our Patreon campaign. So Patreon is a crowdfunding site for people that are willing to be recurring monthly donors. David, what if 25,000 people, David, what if 100,000 people were willing to part with $3 or $5 a month on a recurring monthly basis? That would give us a really large budget to increase our capacity as to how many wrongful conviction cases we could work on, how many states could we pursue policy changes in. And let's say we get enough support, we can open other chapters in other states and ultimately in each country. And I really want to take this worldwide. So hope that happens. And hopefully somewhere along the way, people that have a larger social media platform than me, or even celebrities. Imagine like a 30-second video discussing wrongful conviction, referencing the foundation, incorporating the crowdfunding site on there, encouraging people. I mean, that could be a difference-making thing. If you're a celebrity, maybe we need celebrity spokespeople. If you work for a company and they do corporate philanthropy, just suggest us. I do speaking engagements throughout the country and internationally. Often the way that happens, somebody just floats the idea, they reach out to me, and one thing leads to another, and finally, boom, I'm there. In terms of reaching out, definitely the website, www.deskovic.org. There is a web form there. You can email me that way. And I also have a public figure page on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn. I have a public figure page. Yeah, I mentioned that. Yeah, those three. So you can email me through there and get my messages. So really, I really appreciate you sharing your platform with me today and just having this out of left field conversation, which was really refreshingly different, man. I don't even feel like I worked just now. It was great. I just talked to a really cool guy, man, and everyone just kind of hears and will benefit from the conversation. So that's really the challenge as well. If you're listening, yeah, it's a great story, it's a great conversation. More importantly, is there a nugget in there? Can you find something that you find some meaning that you could then apply to yourself, or evolve a thinking, something you can make a difference, in your life afterwards? And that really is. That's really what it's all about. Try new things, try new things, and you don't say you didn't like something without you actually trying it, and appreciate all the small things. David, I still love. I like feeling the sun on my face. I like fresh air. I like freedom of movement and being able to go places. And look, I even appreciate electricity. I mean, your fuse would blow in your cell in prison, and nobody wants to change the damn fuse. And I might be without power for 3 days. So, I appreciate just the ability to have it. So I guess the small things is what I'm saying. And so many opportunities, that exist just being in the world. And for 100% that it's better to chase your dreams and to go all out, try to turn the dreams into reality. It's better to do that, even if you ultimately fail. And we'll define failure really is not achieving it, But I think in a larger sense, the only failure is when you don't try. But it's better to try to turn your dreams into reality. And it's better to do that as opposed to always wondering, well, what could have happened.
I love that. Jeff, know what I'm going to do? In probably 6 months. I'm giving you 6 months to a year, but probably 6 months, because I'm going to challenge you. You said you have a lot of things you want to see and do, and so on and so forth. So in 6 months, I want you back on my podcast, and I want to see you all nice and tanned up and just loving life. And I want you to let me know what you ticked off on your bucket list. Okay.
100%. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Don't lose my name, and you got to reach me. And I'd love to come back on. I'd love to come back on for sure and tell you what things on the bucket list I've done, and what other achievements that I've done on the advocacy trail, even just in personal life. It would be great.
Exactly. And you know what? I'm gonna try and find because I have your info. I'm gonna try and find some chess site that we could go on and just play chess together, because that'll be kind of cool as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Look, we could just use Facebook Messenger, and you got to play algebraic notation, right?
Yeah.
We could for sure play that way. Yes, I would love to do that.
That'll be awesome. All right, Jeff. Thank you so much. This is Real Talk. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.